Hey there folks, it's Nick from Beyond the Specs, and today we're going to be reviewing the new Rhino Arc II. I work as a visual engineer, focusing in motion control technologies. I program large industrial robots for cinematic motion to small motion control sliders. We've recently become interested in motion control options in the more affordable range. The Rhino Arc II is actually a motion controller, a motorized pan-tilt head, and really a communication hub for the entire Rhino system. It claims to have a payload of up to 15 pounds, making it capable of carrying everything from a DSLR all the way to a RED camera. We'll put that to the test later in the review. For our use, we ordered and paid for the Ultimate Slider Bundle, which came in at about $3,650 plus tax. It includes a full 42-inch slider rails, the Arc II head, the Rhino focus motor, the Rhino high torque motor, Rhino high speed motor, and a set of 24-inch carbon rails, chargers to power it all, and a case to carry it all in. They even threw in a nifty mounting tool and a bottle opener. We've used it with everything from a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K all the way up to a Red Ranger Gemini to test that weight capacity. So there's been a good amount of range to test this device's performance here. Let's talk about the build quality, and let's talk about the physical qualities of the slider kit. First and foremost, everything feels and looks very well built. The rods are solid, the small details are well done, and everything interconnects by using what appears to be Ethernet cables. And while we haven't swapped out the included cables, the ones they include are flat, flexible, and high quality. They don't easily get caught in the railing or the rigging of the system. The focus motor. While adequate, the focus motor on this device isn't as strong as the one that we used on the Echochrony system, and it's lacking some of that power that we're used to. At the same time, it's a lot less likely to tear your lens apart because you don't really need all of that torque to pull focus on lenses. But we did some shooting on a couple of lenses where the follow focus actually did have a bit of a struggle to keep things moving. The sliders on this device are smooth, and by smooth we mean really smooth. They move well in manual mode, and you can tell the tolerances are tight. The carbon fiber rails are light and rigid, and when you need a smaller, more compact setting, this is a really nice feature to have. We found ourselves more often than not just simply using a 42-inch set of slider rails, because if you're going through all the trouble to set it all up, you might as well go for a longer slider. Rhino loves to talk about the support points on this device because uniquely, there's one on each end of the slider, as well as one in the center, supporting the 42-inch slider out on its ends without having to worry about the payload tipping over. They've also included some really nice hand-turnable nuts that are connected to the slider. To attach the Arc II to the slider, the Arc II actually turns its pan motor to pull itself down onto the mounting point. The one thing I would caution is that you want to make sure that the thread is started at least a little bit before you start that process. Now, the connection points are pretty nice. The handles are really easy to use and make for easy adjustments on the fly. Putting on the actual motors are really simple. Loosen these screws, put the motor on, and voila. It's a pretty simple and easy setup, but there's still a fair bit of time involved. You gotta put the whole tripod legs on, stand the whole thing up, and if you do 2 sets of tripod legs on the 42-inch slider, you do need them to get to the same height for an interview. We're using a Miller Aero 55 that is a 55-pound payload on the head, and we're attaching it at the center. Honestly, the amount of flex that we're getting on the extremes of this system is pretty slight, but it wouldn't be enough for pixel-perfect motion control. But it was fine for interviews and such, and we're going to talk about the idea of repeatable motion versus true motion control later. Let's talk about what it's like to actually work with the Rhino 2 system. You can do everything in the Rhino system through the actual head unit. You can do all your programming there, and honestly, I'm liking that a lot. The Arc II does come with an app, and the app itself is pretty nifty. It's pretty responsive, but it still has a couple of drawbacks. I really do love the idea of using the head for actual programming because I don't need Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, and it's just one less thing that I have to rely on. This is a Manfrotto compatible baseplate that just slides in, and all you gotta do is just mount it on your camera. We mounted it midway to try and find the center point, and adjusted it per the prompts to calibrate it. With heavier packages, especially ones with a lot of weight in the back, you may need to use longer plates to move that weight forward. Once your camera is actually up, you just go into video mode, and from there, you can keyframe all of your different slide, pans, tilts, and focuses, just using the joysticks. The Rhino system is currently limited to just 2 pre-programmed points, though Rhino is working on more. For basic work like interviews, that's perfectly okay, but for product work, we found it limiting. The menu has some other options as well, like looping the move you just programmed or fast focus. If you're doing a lot of macro work and you have a long focus pull, you're definitely going to want to use that. You can also change the duration, which balances the amount of time between each move, and if you're using the high speed motor, it's about 20 seconds to however long you want to go, or if you're using the high torque motor, which is slower but more powerful, it's about 40 seconds on. The Rhino system automatically calculates that duration and how fast it'll move. This sounds simple, and it would be simple if it actually worked precisely. In our particular unit, we've hit some issues. Even with packages as light as the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, it just doesn't encode those points correctly. It'll drift to a point that we didn't define, and even if we edit that keyframe, it'll still drift to a point that isn't 100% right. It will hit that wrong point though. I don't know what's going on. And yes, we are running the latest firmware. Even when we changed those keyframes in the unit, it still didn't hold those points precisely. Frankly, it's not smooth under motor power all the time. The slider itself is smooth, so it's not that, it's the motor. And part of the necessity of motion control is making slow moves look really smooth. For us, we often don't end up editing the footage we shoot. We would just have it ship off to a post house with obvious errors in the footage. With a tight turnaround time in production, this can be a problem. We checked in with Rhino's Facebook page, and unfortunately, this seems to be a common issue. Rhino's come out and said they're going to replace those motors, but some folks are on their second and third motors. A lot of users may have these problems and may not notice it because they shoot larger scale scenes, but for us in the tabletop and macro cinematography worlds, we see the small jitters. And jitters like this can take a lot of moves out of play. Moves like match cutting to certain products or even just repeating the same setup multiple times. It's made us wary of using the Rhino Arc II on a professional job. If you watched our Jib 1 review, you'll see that we often lame it at the fact that the Jib 1 would often not find its starting point, but it eventually would find that starting point and actually perform its move. And we actually prefer that. If you can't find that true start point, don't start the move. Because if you do start the move at the wrong point, you're just recording the wrong information and leaving yourself a nasty surprise. With regards to heavier payloads, we noticed that these problems were worse. If you look at Rhino's website, you'll see a lot of advertisements with huge red mount cameras and huge V-mount batteries in the back. And honestly, we have no clue how they were doing that and getting that performance. Because even when we set this thing up with a red Ranger Gemini or red Helium DSMC2 under the weight capacity, we just were not getting that same performance. Now, the final issue we have with this device is its batteries. And on all of our devices, we actually prefer external batteries. We might just have bad luck, but our sample just doesn't hold charge to 100%. And Rhino says that they're updating the firmware to fix this issue, but it doesn't hold a charge when it's powered off either. It may just be a defective unit. We're just kind of optimistic that Rhino will fix this in later firmware updates. They have a system here that's super well built, but that software just isn't there for our needs yet. And we're super excited to see where they go because this is a fully integrated system that has tremendous potential. With all of that said, I hope you found this helpful. If there are any questions or comments, please leave them below. We're paid by nobody, we spend our own money to buy all this equipment. This is a platform for us to give you some of that insight and support you guys as artists. Like and subscribe and take care guys. Peace.